We all have secrets, some we take to the grave, others we wish we had never kept. Today, I'm sharing 10 shocking confessions straight from Reddit. From love that came too late to betrayals that shattered lives, these real-life stories will leave you speechless. Some will break your heart, others will make you question everything. Are you ready? 1. The fake promotion. I've been lying to my family for over a year about getting a promotion at work. Every time they ask how my new role is going, I make up stories about leading projects and getting raises. In reality, I'm still in the same entry-level position, barely scraping by. I just couldn't handle the disappointment in their eyes when I told them I hadn't moved up. 2. The dog park deception. I take my dog to the park every weekend, but not for him, it's for me. There's this guy who shows up with his golden retriever, and we've been casually chatting for months. He thinks I'm just a friendly dog owner, but the truth is, I've been crushing on him hard. I even started researching golden retrievers so I'd have more to talk about. My dog is just my wingman. 3. The fake hobby. I joined a book club to impress a girl I liked. The problem: I hate reading. For months, I've been skimming summaries online and pretending to have deep thoughts about books I've never actually read. She thinks I'm this intellectual, but I'm just a guy who's really good at Googling. 4. The secret roommate. My landlord has no idea I've been subletting my spare room to a friend for the past 6 months. I needed the extra cash, and my friend needed a place to stay. We've become experts at sneaking around, but I live in constant fear of getting caught and evicted. 5. The wedding crasher. I accidentally crashed a wedding once. I was at the venue for a work event, saw an open bar, and just blended in. I danced, ate cake, and even caught the bouquet. To this day, I have no idea whose wedding it was, but it was the best night of my life. 6. The fake allergy. I've been pretending to have a shellfish allergy for years because I didn't want to hurt my grandma's feelings. She once made this terrible shrimp dish, and I panicked and said I was allergic to avoid eating it. Now, every family gathering involves her apologizing for not being able to cook my favorite foods, and I feel like the worst person alive. 7. The lost ring. I lost my best friend's grandmother's ring that she lent me for a party. I was too scared to tell her, so I replaced it with a cheap knockoff. She never noticed, but I still feel guilty every time I see her wearing it. 8. The fake breakup. I faked a breakup with my long-distance boyfriend because I was too scared to tell my friends I'd never actually met him in person. We've been dating for 2 years, and they think we're this perfect couple. Meanwhile, I'm just a girl with a laptop and a lot of feelings for someone I've only seen on a screen. 9. The office saboteur. I've been secretly unplugging the office coffee machine every morning because I can't stand the smell of coffee. My coworkers think it's broken, and no one has figured out it's me. I've become the office hero for fixing it every time I plug it back in. 10. The fake inheritance. I told my friends I inherited a bunch of money from a distant relative so they'd stop feeling sorry for me when I couldn't afford to go out. Now, they think I'm loaded, and I'm stuck pretending to be this wealthy, carefree person. Meanwhile, I'm eating ramen and praying my car doesn't break down. 11. The stranger in the photograph. I found an old Polaroid in a thrift store of a couple kissing under a street lamp. For some reason, I bought it and kept it on my desk. One day, my boyfriend saw it and froze. He asked where I got it, and I told him. He went pale and confessed that he was the man in the photo, but the woman wasn't me. It was his ex, who disappeared years ago. Now, I can't stop wondering why her photo ended up in a thrift store, and if she's still out there. 12. The midnight texts. Every night at exactly 2:13 a.m., I get a text from an unknown number that just says, "I miss you." I've never replied, but I've also never blocked it. Last week, I finally caved and texted back, "Who is this?" The response chilled me to my core. You know who this is. You've been ignoring me for too long. The thing is, I don't know who it is. But now, I'm starting to hear footsteps outside my door at night. 13. The forgotten love letter. I was cleaning out my attic when I found a love letter addressed to me from 10 years ago. It was from my high school best friend, confessing feelings I never knew they had. The problem: they died in a car accident shortly after graduation. I never got the letter, and now I'm left wondering what could have been. I've started dreaming about them every night, and in the dreams, they keep saying, "You were supposed to find this sooner." 14. The doppelganger date. I went on a date with a guy the first met online, and he looked exactly like my ex. Like, uncannily identical. I didn't say anything, but halfway through dinner, he leaned in and whispered, "You noticed it too, didn't you?" Turns out, he's my ex's twin brother, a twin my ex never told me about. He said he wanted to meet me to see if I was as amazing as his brother claimed. Now, I don't know if I'm falling for him, or the ghost of my past. 15. The locked diary. I found my mom's old diary in the basement, locked with a tiny key. When I finally opened it, I discovered pages filled with entries about a man who wasn't my dad. She wrote about secret meetings, stolen kisses, and a love she could never forget. The last entry was dated the day before she died. It said, "If you're reading this, I'm sorry. The truth is, he's your real father." I haven't told anyone, but I've started digging into her past, and I'm terrified of what I might find. 16. The vanishing neighbor. A few months ago, a mysterious man moved into the apartment across from mine. We'd exchanged smiles in the hallway, but he never spoke. One night, I heard loud music coming from his place and went to complain. When he opened the door, he looked at me like he'd seen a ghost and whispered, "You're not supposed to be here." The next day, he was gone. The landlord said no one had lived there for years. But I still hear the music sometimes. 17. The second proposal. My husband proposed to me on a beach at sunset, and it was perfect. But last week, I found a ring hidden in his sock drawer, a ring that wasn't mine. When I confronted him, he broke down and admitted he was planning to propose to someone else before he met me. He said he called it off, but I can't shake the feeling that there's more to the story. Now, I'm wondering if I'm the backup plan, or if the other woman ever really left. 18. The ghost writer. I've been writing anonymous love letters to my coworker and leaving them on her desk. She thinks they're from someone else, and it's been thrilling to watch her try to figure out who it is. But last week, I got a letter in return. It said, "I know it's you." The handwriting wasn't hers. Now, I'm stuck wondering who else knows my secret, and why they're playing along. 19. The time capsule secret. In high school, my friends and I buried a time capsule with letters to our future selves. We promised to open it together in 10 years. But when we dug it up last week, there was an extra letter inside, one none of us wrote. It was addressed to me and said, "I've been watching you. You're not who you think you are." The handwriting looked eerily familiar, but I can't place it. Now, I'm questioning everything about my past. 20. The stranger's wedding. I crashed a wedding once, just for fun. I blended in, danced, and even gave a toast. The bride pulled me aside and said, "I'm so glad you came. I wasn't sure you would." I played along, but I had no idea who she was. Later, I found a photo of us together in her album, from a trip I've never been on. She thinks I'm someone else, and I'm too deep in the lie to tell her the truth. But now, I'm starting to wonder if I'm the one who's forgotten something. 21. The forgotten twin. I grew up as an only child, or so I thought. When I was 17, my parents had a brutal fight. My father screamed, "At least I didn't abandon my own son." That night, I tore through old documents in the attic and found a birth certificate with my last name, but a different first name. I confronted my mother, and she broke down. I had a twin brother. He had severe medical issues, and my parents couldn't afford to raise both of us. They gave him up for adoption, never telling me. I found him years later. He had the same eyes as me but looked like a stranger. We sat in silence, both realizing that life could have been so different. 22. The silent passenger. I was driving home late at night when I stopped at a red light. In my rearview mirror, I saw a man in my backseat. I panicked, heart racing, but before I could react, the light turned green. I slammed the gas and sped through, hoping to shake him. When I dared to look back again, he was gone. The next morning, I checked my dashcam footage. The man was never there. But just as I was about to delete the clip, I saw something horrifying, a shadowy figure walking towards my car before vanishing into thin air. 23. The last voicemail. My best friend, Daniel, died in a car accident 5 years ago. A few months after his death, I got a voicemail from his number. It was just static, but I swore I could hear his voice whispering my name. I thought it was a prank, but then I checked the timestamp. It had been sent at the exact minute he died the previous year. It happened again the next year. And the next. Now, I keep my phone on silent every anniversary, afraid of what I might hear next. 24. The mirror game. When I was a kid, my sister and I played a game. We'd stare into a mirror and count to 10, then turn away and count again. The trick was, if you looked back too soon, the reflection would still be looking at you. We laughed it off as kids' imagination. Years later, I visited my childhood home. On a whim, I tried it again. At 10, I turned around. When I turned back, my reflection hadn't moved. It smiled at me. I ran. 25. The stranger in my house. I live alone. A few months ago, weird things started happening. Doors slightly ajar, things moved, food missing. I thought I was losing my mind. Then one night, I stayed up late watching TV. At around 2:26. The love letter that never reached. In high school, I wrote a love letter to my best friend, pouring my heart onto the page. But I was too scared to give it to her, so I stuffed it inside a library book we both used for study sessions. Years passed, and we drifted apart. Last year, she called me out of the blue. She had borrowed that same book for her younger brother, and found my letter. She asked, "Did you really love me back then?" My voice trembled as I whispered, "I never stopped." 27. My wife's first love letter, to someone else. On our anniversary, my wife and I were going through old keepsakes when I found a letter she had written years ago. It was addressed to someone else, a childhood crush she never confessed to. My heart sank, but she laughed and took my hand. "I never sent it," she said, "because by the time I finished writing it, I had already fallen for you." 28. The stranger who loved me for a decade. For 10 years, someone anonymously sent me flowers every Valentine's Day. I thought it was a prank, until I met my fiancé. On our third date, he hesitated before admitting, "It was me. I watched you from afar, waiting for the right time to tell you how I felt." I stared at him in shock, realizing that the love I had been looking for was right there all along. 29. The confession that came too late. We were childhood best friends, always inseparable. The day before she left for college, I almost told her I loved her, but fear held me back. She moved away, fell in love, got married. Years later, I attended her wedding, smiling as I watched her dance with someone else. As she passed by me, she whispered, "I waited for you." 30. Love at the wrong time. I met the perfect girl at the worst time. We clicked instantly. Same humor, same dreams. But I was engaged. We kept it respectful, never crossing the line, but my heart knew. Years later, after my marriage fell apart, I ran into her at a coffee shop. She smiled and said, "I was hoping I'd see you again." 31. The girl in the red dress. Every Saturday night, I saw the same girl in a red dress at a bookstore cafe, always lost in a novel. One day, I finally got the courage to talk to her, but before I could, she left, dropping a note behind. To the boy who always watches but never speaks, I hope you say hello next time. I never found her again, but I still go there every Saturday, hoping. 32. The love that survived a war. My grandfather told me about the girl he loved before he went off to war. They promised to find each other if he ever returned. But when he came home, she was gone. He married my grandmother, lived a good life, but always kept an old photograph in his wallet. When my grandmother passed, he confessed, "I loved them both. But in different ways." 33. A wedding objection that never happened. I sat in the back row of her wedding, gripping the seat so hard my knuckles turned white. When the officiant said, "Speak now or forever hold your peace," my heart screamed, but I stayed silent. As she walked down the aisle with her husband, she glanced at me. And I knew she had been waiting for me to stop her. 34. The one who knew before I did. I spent years dating the wrong people, never realizing my best friend was the one. One night, after a bad breakup, I told him, "I just want someone who understands me." He laughed softly and said, I've been understanding you for years. That was the moment I finally saw it. 35. A love letter from the past. Cleaning out my grandmother's attic, I found an old, unopened letter addressed to my grandfather. Inside, it said, "If you're reading this, you chose me." I rushed downstairs to ask him about it. He smiled and said, "There was someone else once. But when I got this letter, I knew, she was always the one." 36. The fake girlfriend that became real. In college, I had a huge crush on my best friend, but she only saw me as a friend. One day, to make my ex jealous, she asked me to pretend to be her boyfriend for a party. I agreed, hoping that maybe, just maybe, she'd see me differently. That night, when we kissed for pretend, something changed. Years later, she admitted, "That night, I realized I loved you too." 37. The wedding dance that wasn't meant for me. My girlfriend and I had been together for 5 years, but she broke up with me, saying she needed time. A year later, she invited me to her wedding. I thought I was over her, until I saw her walking down the aisle. During the first dance, she locked eyes with me for just a second, and in that moment, I knew, she had once loved me the way I still loved her. 38. A love note in the wrong hands. I wrote an anonymous love note to my crush and slipped it into her locker. The next day, she read it aloud to our friend group, laughing about it. I felt my heart shatter. Then, she turned to my best friend and said, "This is so sweet of you." He went along with it. They've been married for years now, and I never told them the truth. 39. The girl in the elevator. I got stuck in an elevator with a girl during a power outage. We talked for hours, shared secrets, even confessed past heartbreaks. When the doors finally opened, I wanted to ask for her number, but she just smiled and said, "Some things are better left as a perfect memory." I still think about her, wondering if she ever thinks about me. 40. My father's secret family. One day, I accidentally opened an old shoebox in my dad's closet. Inside were pictures of another family, a woman and 2 kids. They looked just like me. My father walked in, saw what I was holding, and said nothing. Just sighed. Turns out, I was the second family. The secret one, and I never told my mother. 41. The stranger who knew my name. I was on a train, lost in thought, when an old man across from me said, "You look just like her." Confused, I asked, "Like who?" He smiled sadly and whispered, "Your mother." I had never met my mom. She died when I was a baby. The man got off at the next stop before I could ask him anything else. I never saw him again. 42. The journal that revealed the truth. After my brother passed away, I found his old journal hidden in a drawer. He had written about his struggles, his fears, and a girl he had loved but never told. The last entry was a letter to her, never sent. It ended with, "Maybe in another life." I found the girl, gave her the journal, and watched her cry as she whispered, "I always loved him too." 43. The baby that wasn't mine. My wife and I had been trying for a baby for years. When she finally got pregnant, I was overjoyed. But a month before the birth, she confessed. The baby wasn't mine. I walked out that night and never looked back. She begged me to stay, but all I could say was, "This isn't the life we dreamed of." 44. The childhood promise that came true. When we were kids, my neighbor and I made a silly promise. If we weren't married by 30, we'd marry each other. Life happened. We lost touch. At 29, I got a message. 1 more year left on our deal. I laughed it off. But on my 30th birthday, she showed up at my door with a ring. So, what do you say? 45. The goodbye that was a second chance. My first love and I broke up because of distance. We promised to move on. Years later, we ran into each other at an airport. She was boarding a flight to start a new life abroad. I was flying home. She looked at me, tears in her eyes, and asked, "Do you think we could have made it?" I grabbed her hand and said, "Let's find out." I changed my flight that day. 46. The text that wasn't meant for me. One night, my phone buzzed with a text from my wife. "I can't wait to see you again. I miss you so much." My heart sank. I was sitting right next to her. I stared at the message, then at her. She saw my face and knew. Without a word, I handed her the phone. She didn't even try to lie. 47. The neighbor who wasn't a stranger. I moved into a new apartment and kept noticing my neighbor, a quiet, older man who always gave me a strange look. One day, he finally spoke. "I used to know your mother. My mother had died when I was a baby." That night, I dug through old photos and found one of her, with him. He wasn't just a neighbor. He was my father. 48. The wedding gift that exposed the truth. At my best friend's wedding, I gave her a scrapbook of our childhood memories. As she flipped through it, she suddenly froze. Her hands trembled as she pulled out a picture, one I had forgotten was even in there. It was of her fiancé, kissing her sister. 49. The lottery ticket I never claimed. I won the lottery 5 years ago. Not millions, but enough to change my life. But I never cashed the ticket. I was too scared. Scared of how money would change me, scared I'd lose my friends, scared it would all go wrong. To this day, the ticket sits in a box under my bed. Expired. Worthless. 50. The journal entry that wasn't meant for me. My wife kept a journal. I never read it, until the night she passed away. Flipping through the pages, I expected memories of our love. Instead, I found one chilling sentence, written over and over: "I should have married him instead." Some secrets change lives, some remain hidden forever. Which of these confessions hit you the hardest? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more unbelievable real-life stories. Until next time, keep your secrets safe.